Anything you ever thought your life was going to be from going forward is gone. And I had no clue really what I was supposed to do next. You're in this little black window for a period of time, trying to sort of figure out. I'm an optimistic person, so it's hard for me. I wasn't going to stay down long, and I knew that. And I just had to kind of reset myself, into this new person.
Welcome to BrainStorm by Us Against Alzheimer's, a patient-centered nonprofit organization. Your host, Meryl Comer, is a co-founder, 24-year caregiver, an Emmy Award-winning journalist, and the author of the New York Times bestseller, Slow Dancing with a Stranger.
This is BrainStorm, and I'm Meryl Comer. The Alzheimer's community is in a silent crisis. 50% of people believed to have dementia go undiagnosed, and a shortage of trained neurologists keep people and families waiting up to a year or more to be seen by a specialist. Our guest today is Doreen Monks, a former neuroscience nurse practitioner diagnosed with early-onset Alzheimer's at age 63, was told 8 years later that her updated diagnosis was mixed dementia. I asked her advice on how to prepare in advance of seeing a specialist because you're losing precious time while waiting.
I have to say that my reaction was more visceral. Not that I was prepared for the diagnosis originally. It was just I had the diagnosis, and then I went about being the pragmatic nurse that I am about what I needed to do and just decided, okay, well, I have to deal with this. So I was dealing with it, I thought, for the 8 years, or so that I had it. And then when I got the diagnosis that you don't have, the Alzheimer's disease, that you had a PET scan, amyloid PET scan, it was normal. I was so floored. I don't think I could react. I was with a friend of mine who was my study buddy, which is how this all came about. And I just looked at her, and we were both couldn't speak. And then I was angry. I was very angry. So much had happened in those 8.5 years or so that I'm never getting back. I owned my own home. I had a job that I loved with a good salary. I had my dog, who was my family. I had a lot. Just my life was full. It was where I wanted it to be. And my plan was to just, die at my desk. I loved my work. It was just me and Abby. I thought, well, if I get old enough, I'll just bring her as a companion to work, and we'll just spend the rest of our time together at work. When it was a no, I was furious and sad, but I didn't know who to react to. Who do I get angry? Who am I mad at? Whose fault is this? Not mine, but it really wasn't anybody's fault. So it was just a tumultuous time. And, I finally got to the point where I thought, well, you know what? You dealt with this before, you'll just deal with it again. And now I'm on a new journey to find what the real diagnosis is. So it's almost like starting all over again, but more emotional this time than last time.
Doreen, let's go back in time a bit. Can you describe your professional focus as a neuroscience nurse practitioner before your original diagnosis?
I worked as a nurse practitioner for almost 30 or so years. And the primary point of my practice was actually in stroke management and treatment and community education. I actually developed the stroke program at St. Barnabas in Livingston, New Jersey, and was the program director. And I kept that, position until I stopped working. I had a staff of 6 people, a vascular neurologist who was a very dear friend, and I had 4 other nurses that worked with me. We were 6 women, a little group, but really ran, I think, a dynamic program. I wanted to stay until we got some other certifications that we were planning on, and I thought, well, I'm 63. I think I have still energy to work. Just what would I do if I stayed home? I loved it. I did a lot of teaching, did a lot of community work. I treated patients. I worked with the physicians. It was just a very well-rounded experience. And every day was different. You made plans, and sometimes they worked out and sometimes they didn't, because patients have a way of popping in when you were least expected.
As a bedside nurse who cared for patients with vascular dementia, what were your personal feelings and emotions about their challenges?
Well, my mother actually had vascular dementia, and I took care of her for 4 years, 3 years or so. With the patients, what happens in the brain when the vascular dementia is like you pop off a little vessel, and then you pop off another vessel, and then you pop off another one. Eventually, they all kind of connect, and then you get the dementia related to vascular dementia. And, it's heartbreaking, because you're working with the patient and the family, there was still not a lot, going out. There was no treatment. The treatment for vascular dementia was really preventative, treating high blood pressure, cholesterol problems, etc. So there was really nothing to do for them except try to keep them as best top physical condition that you could. It's always been, something that part of you wants to run away from. The other big part of me wants to stay, and try to make it better.
Doreen, you're a very smart lady. In hindsight, were there signs and symptoms in your professional work that you simply ignored?
I had no clue at first. And then my medical director, again, my friend, neurologist, she knocked on my door, actually in 2015, this was. So that took a long time for a diagnosis. But so she knocks on my office door at 9 o'clock in the morning in October. And she said, something's going on with you. We have to talk about it. And then she started to explain things. And I thought, my God, she's right. And when I look back, I've never been a paper person. I used to always say patients before paper. But as my administrative role got, more complicated, I had more paper things to do and documentations and et cetera. And I was starting to have difficulty with them. At one point, I went for an evaluation. They said, clinically, you're a stellar, but, we're not going to give you a raise this year because you're still having some difficulty with the increased responsibility. And that had never happened in 40 years as a nurse, ever. I was devastated. I know you're getting dumber as you get older, something happening with your brain, never thinking it was the dementia, just thinking that something wasn't right, that I wasn't getting it, and it was my fault.
So, Doreen, what advice do you have for people who notice something in a friend but are afraid to say something?
It's a very hard conversation to have, but you have to have the conversation. You can practice it till you feel comfortable. Sometimes it's easier to bring up, did you ever notice that this is happening? Or did you notice that this is happening? And kind of help them get to the realization with you. But the worst thing is to not do anything. That whole window is very narrow. And if you don't bring them to the realization that something's going on and get them tested, that window is fastly resolved. You can move very quickly out of that window. Now, at some point, a couple of years from now, we'll have better treatments that will be farther into the disease. But right now, we only have early disease. So the earlier you can get diagnosed and the earlier you can help your loved one or your friend or your sister, whoever, you can help them get to the realization that there's a problem and get to a possibility of getting a treatment, getting diagnosed. You would be no better friend than to do that.
The diagnostic experience is a challenging one for families. How was your experience?
I've been a neuro nurse since 1975. I like to tell everybody that I was 10 then, but that joke is so old and I'm so old it doesn't work anymore. What I know, it was difficult. It took me literally, I think, 13 and a half months to actually get a diagnosis in the hospital that I was working with the neurologist who was on my payroll. It wasn't anybody's fault. There was no test. At that point, Alzheimer's was basically a clinical diagnosis because the only way you could identify it is actually through autopsy. It was a clinical diagnosis based on, well, it looks like this looks like this, and this looks like that. And you put them together and you have Alzheimer's disease. I can't tell you how many scans I went for, how many EEGs I had, the 73 gallons of blood that they drew from me. And then it was like, you have mild cognitive impairment, but you don't have Alzheimer's. Then I had Alzheimer's, but I think it's a frontal variant. And then, well, maybe you have frontal temporal dementia. And then we went back to Alzheimer's. It was like the bobbing wheel of diagnoses. And again, I knew what was going on. I understood all the information they were giving me. I understood the testing. I understood the process. None of that was scary to me because I had spent my life doing that. What I feel for is the regular person. There's not a lot of data about it. It was just very vague, very dark disease that nobody talked about. So there wasn't a lot out there. So, and even now it's still a journey, but at least now we have someplace we can start the process.
Doreen, let's continue to retrace your journey. Even in 2016, there was tremendous stigma around the disease. At 63, you're in your prime and you're handed an Alzheimer's diagnosis. What is the reaction of those around you and what happens professionally?
I told most people that I was retiring. I just didn't want to have to deal with all of that. Gee, that's awful. And oh my God, what are you going to do now? And all that angst everybody else is going to have. So I wanted to hide from that. I did tell some people who I'm close with. Obviously, I told my staff. And basically, the neuropsychologist that I was working with felt very strongly that my position was too much stress for me to be working at. So basically, I got the actual diagnosis in April of 2016. And by July 18 of 2016, I was out of work. Anything you ever thought your life was going to be from going forward is gone. And I had no clue really what I was supposed to do next. You're in this little black window for a period of time, trying to sort of figure out. I'm an optimistic person, so it's hard for me. I wasn't going to stay down long, and I knew that. And I just had to kind of reset myself, into this new person.
Teach us how you reset yourself.
I have to find something to do. You can only clean so much, you can only cook so much, you can only shop so much, especially since you don't have a lot of money anymore. So God knows I can talk. And I love to teach. And I thought, well, if you think about it, Doreen, while you have this diagnosis, you're really okay. Like, you're doing fine. I mean, not think about the work stuff, just life stuff. I mean, I did this all on my own. I mean, I have family and they love me and I love them, but they were not at all involved in any of this. I thought, well, you got yourself straightened out. Now what do you want to do? I'm lucky in that I can still manage myself. I can still take care of myself. I am still, to me, the same person, but different than I was a few months ago. I want to work with people in similar situations as mine because I'm expecting to have a good life because I think I deserve a good life. And if I deserve it, so do they. And I think it's very easy to get, when you get this diagnosis, just say, oh my God, my life is over. And that's not what it is. It may be still a fatal disease, but it's not a death sentence. But that's what people take. Because in their head, they have a picture of this very sick person lying in a hospital bed or a nursing home bed, just not able to function at all. So let me see if I can work with some people and be more proactive, give a more positive outcome, not a foolish outcome. I'm not going to tell everybody, oh, this is exciting. Everybody deserves to have the best life they can. And I wanted to be able to help them do that.
Did you find advocacy empowering?
Oh, it was like life-changing. I met a lot of people, heard a lot of stories, and some very tragic, some uplifting. I like to think I helped some people. They certainly helped me. I have a new purpose. And that's all everybody needs in their life is a purpose to go on. They give that to me, and I hope I give that to people I work with.
Doreen, based on your personal experience with an early diagnosis, describe the impact.
The hard reality of this disease, and I remember I had gone to the Alzheimer's Association's website, and they had a list of things to do when you get diagnosed, and I did every one of them. I have a living will, a dead will, a power of attorney, a financial advisor, all those things. Average lifespan from diagnosis to death was 9 years. So I thought, I'm lucky if I make 70. I'm not sure I'll make 70. So I planned for that. But now, the earlier the diagnosis, the better control you have over everything. You should plan your own future the way you want it. I lost 70% of my income. I had a long-term care policy, insurance policy that lasted for 5 years. They thought maybe I'd be dead by then. I'm not sure. So I think if people are getting diagnosed now, planning for your future, but being proactive and being your own advocate, that's really important. If you're going to the physician and you're talking about things that are concerning you and you're getting, don't worry, you say, I am worried. And if I'm worried, you have to be worried because you're my physician. They work for you. You don't work for them. Probably going to get in trouble for that.
Let's stay with that issue. I want you to talk to physicians. Tell them what they need to know and how they should behave with people who come with concerns beyond another medical issue they're dealing with. What advice do you have for them?
The most important thing is to believe them. You must believe them. Nobody knows you, including your brain, better than you. I saw my primary care physician. That's when I started this process. And she said to me, Doreen, I don't see anything, but you know what? I'm not a neuropsychologist. let's look at this. Let's start the process. I was very lucky. And that's what every physician should do. Even if your index of suspicion is very low, you have to take that complaint seriously and start the diagnostic process for a couple of reasons. First of all, if it's a form of dementia, again, the earlier the diagnosis, and again, if it's Alzheimer's, the better likelihood you get a treatment. But the other thing is there are things out there that cause dementia-like symptoms, which are reversible. Thyroid problems, kidney problems, if you have diabetes, difficulties with your glucose management. There's a lot of things out there that mimic that. So you want to get those because, if you let that go, that becomes a chronic problem. So the most important is believe your patient and then follow up on it.
Our guest today is Doreen Monks, a former neuroscience nurse practitioner who was diagnosed with early-onset Alzheimer's in 2016 at age 63. 8 years later, she was told her diagnosis was wrong. In part 2 of our conversation, we talk about ways family members need to be proactive to be heard by the medical community.
I think if there's somebody with you, like my husband is the person who's having difficulty, absolutely you must go with them and write down everything, carry a note. So literally with a piece of paper say, these are the things that I have been noticing my husband doing over the last 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, whatever. And I need them to be evaluated because that's really important.
That's it for this edition. I'm Meryl Comer. Thank you for brainstorming with us.
Support for BrainStorm by Us Against Alzheimer's comes from Genentech. Genentech is prepared to ask tough questions to help tackle the root causes of systemic inequities in healthcare. Subscribe to BrainStorm through your favorite podcast platform and join us for new episodes on the first and third Tuesday of every month.